Menachem Mautner. Mautner is the Rubinstein Professor of Comparative Civil Law and Jurisprudence at Tel Aviv University Faculty of Law, and he was formerly our dean here at the law school. He has been a visiting professor at Michigan Law School, NYU Law School, Cardiff Law School, Venus International University, Columbia, and a visiting scholar at Harvard Law School. Mautner is the editor of 6 books and the author of 5 books. His most recent book, Law and the Culture of Israel, was published in 2011 by Oxford University Press. In 2014, the book was translated into Italian. He's the author of over 80 law review articles and chapters in books published in Israel, Britain, and the U.S., including the most top-rated U.S. law reviews. Menachem's talk today is on the thinness of liberalism and the problems of the liberal camp in Israel's Kulturkampf.
Thank you, Lina. Okay, with the mic.
Maybe get a little closer.
Okay. Thank you. The orientation and contents of the culture of the new Jewish society in Eretz Israel, Palestine, were in dispute among Zionists from the very beginning of their endeavor in the 1880s. For over 2 decades after the inception of their movement, Zionist leaders and activists engaged in bitter controversies over the issue of culture, which time and again threatened to break apart their newly established movement. Whereas religious Zionists advocated that the emerging culture in Eretz Israel would be a traditional Jewish culture founded on the Halakha, secular Zionists advocated for a revival of the waning religious Jewish culture by turning it into a national secular culture, or for constituting the evolving culture on a wholly new secular grounds in opposition to the Jewish religious culture of the diaspora. The new Jewish culture that crystallized in Eretz Israel in the period from 1880 until the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 was modern, Western, and secular. For decades, therefore, it seemed as if the stance of religious Zionism towards the character of the new culture had been resoundingly defeated. In the 1970s, however, 2 far-reaching and interrelated historical processes began to take shape in Israel. First, the decline of the political, social, and cultural hegemony of the labor movement. The second process was the renewal of the war of cultures, the Kulturkampf, that is to say, the struggle over the character of Israeli culture in the coming decades. The religious Zionist group began to position itself as a comprehensive alternative to the previous hegemony with regard to the future shape of Israeli culture. As opposed to the cultural option of making Israel a secular state, strongly connected to Western culture and law, and hence a liberal state, religious Zionists sought to found Israel on the Halakha and on traditional Judaism. In what follows, I wish to focus on the limitations inherent in the liberal secular group in Israel in its struggle over the future shape of Israeli culture. Israeli liberalism, very much like liberalism of other Western countries, is based on classical liberalism of the 18th century. Its prime value is autonomy. It provides the state's citizens with a list of negative rights to protect them from intervention in their affairs by the state, and its institutional focus is the Supreme Court. What are the problems such liberalism faces when it finds itself in a Kulturkampf with a rival religious cultural option? I wish to provide 2 responses. There are many, but I'll focus on 2. One is located in the realm of meaning, that is, it is mainly intellectualist and cognitive. The other in the realm of ontology, that is, the mode of being of members of groups in Israeli society. The term meaning has several meanings. In my paper, I list 5 distinct meanings of the term. In the context of the present talk, I wish to focus on 2 such meanings, namely what I call big meaning and deep meaning. By big meaning, I mean a fairly coherent and developed system of propositions aimed at providing a response to the fundamental questions of the human condition. Big meaning is embedded in what Rawls calls religious, philosophical, and moral comprehensive doctrines. Indeed, religion, the paradigm of Rawls's comprehensive doctrine, is the most comprehensive system of big meaning available to us. Religions usually provide their followers with responses to some fundamental human questions. Who created the world? What is the good life? What happens to human beings after they die? Why is it that there is so much suffering in the world? Why is it that there is so much gross injustice in the world? Next to religion, though to a lesser extent, national culture is another system of big meaning. National cultures usually provide members of national groups with a narrative about the history of the group, its values, its future vision, etc. And finally, some social theories can amount to systems of big meaning as well. The obvious example is Marxism, clearly the most expansive and ambitious socio-historical theory ever enunciated, at least for Western modern intellect. Deep meaning is the meaning embedded. Now I'm moving to deep meaning, from big meaning to deep meaning. Deep meaning is the meaning embedded in high-quality works of literature, poetry, theater, cinema, plastic art, music, dance, architecture, thought, and science that are intellectually enriching and stimulating, that provide insights about the human condition and the world, and that are often emotive. Deep meaning is also embodied in religious texts and rituals. Indeed, for many believers, their exposure to religious texts and their participation in religious rituals are their main encounter with deep meaning. The thirst for big meaning, however, is one human urge. There's a conflicting urge, the desire for normality. There's a complex interrelationship, even a tension, between the two urges. An accepted meaning of the concept of normality is being like everyone. I would like to use a different meaning of the concept of normality, consisting mainly of the human desire to lead a life in which a person, in the course of uninterrupted routine, is involved in promoting her own personal good and that of those close to her, in striving to improve her material situation, in striving to increase the comfort and pleasures of life, in cultivating conjugality, relations with parents, family members, and friends, and above all, the desire for normality means, to those who are parents of children, a dedication to raising the children, providing them with good education, and ensuring them a good future. I think that when Charles Taylor writes about the concept of ordinary life, he has in mind something close, very close, to the concept of normality that I'm dealing with here. Autonomy liberalism is the political regime that manifests the citizens' desire for normality and that guarantees their ability to lead lives of normality. I wish to argue that the balance that different individuals maintain in their lives between big meaning and normality may differ considerably. In the lives of some religious people, big meaning overshadows their desire for normality. Likewise, national and social revolutionaries and activists give priority to big meaning in their lives over their desire for normality. Most people, however, seem to be committed to normality and invest little effort in the question of the big meaning of their lives. Anthony T. Kronman, who compares facing the question of the meaning of life, big meaning in my terms, to staring at the sun, writes that most people confront the question of the meaning of life only at long intervals and obliquely at best. For the most part, we spend our days addressing questions of a humbler kind, writes Kronman. Now, a state committed to autonomy liberalism cannot provide its citizens with a system of big meaning. It leaves it to the citizens to determine the contents of their lives. It is based on a distinction between the right and the good, and even on the priority of the right over the good. The right is public and one. It is supposed to enable the greatest number of individuals to pursue their subjective conception of the good, immune from adverse intervention on the part of the state or other individuals. The good is private and subjective. This is why it is often claimed that liberalism is a theory of the citoyen, not a theory of home. Clearly then, whereas Israel's religious group can provide Israeli citizens with an extremely rich system of what I call big meaning, a system that is widely disseminated by means of a thick network of institutions, Israeli liberals cannot provide their fellow citizens with any such comprehensive system. The most they can do is to act for the creation of the background socio-economic conditions that would allow the citizens to make use of their autonomy in a rich and meaningful way. But with the rise of neoliberalism as the dominant political and socio-economic ideology in Israel in the closing decades of the 20th century, they failed to do even that, to provide the background socio-economic conditions. Clearly, there is a class dimension to all of this. The educated, and in late capitalism, therefore, the well-to-do, have the cultural and economic capital that allows for the consumption of high-quality cultural products of deep meaning, what I call deep meaning. Their immersion in cultural products of deep meaning allows them to cultivate a fairly developed understanding of what constitutes the big meaning of their lives. That is to say, what is for them the good life, albeit not in a very coherent or detailed way. In contrast, working-class people who have only basic education are devoid of the cultural and economic capital necessary for the consumption of cultural products of deep meaning. They are therefore unable to devise even the beginning of a comprehensive system of big meaning through their own intellectual resources. They need others to do that for them. Those others can be either religion or the nation-state, or both. In his memoir of his childhood in 1950s Istanbul, Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk touches upon the inferiority of secular liberalism to religion in the realm of meaning. Interestingly, Pamuk portrays the life of the secular, even when they are well-to-do, as deplete of meaning, and the life of the working class, the servants, as full of meaning, religious meaning, of course. Pamuk writes that following the massive secularization processes conducted by Ataturk, and I quote, nothing came to fill the spiritual void. Cleansed of religion, home became empty as the city's ruined Yalis, the seashore mansions along the Bosphorus, and as gloomy as the fern-darkened gardens surrounding them. The spiritual void I've seen in so many of Istanbul's rich, westernized, secularist families is evident. They grapple with the most basic questions of existence: love, compassion, religion, the meaning of life, jealousy, hatred, in trembling confusion and painful solitude. They light a cigarette, give their attention to the music on the radio, and return wordlessly to their inner worlds. I wish to move on now to the issue of ontology. The roots of autonomy liberalism, the liberalism of negative rights, lie in Hobbes, the founder of modern, secular political theory. Hobbes' ontology is atomistic. It views the individual as self-interested and self-sufficient, as essentially complete independently of civil society, as not embodied in any particular cultural context or in any defined social locus, and as establishing relations with other individuals only in order to further our own predetermined interests and values. Alasdair MacIntyre has famously portrayed this ontology when he claimed that for liberals of this brand, living in society is as though we had been shipwrecked on an uninhabited island with a group of other individuals, each of whom is a stranger to me and to all others. In the same vein, Mark Tashnet, in a way following Marx's terminology, has argued that according to this tradition in liberalism, people exist as isolated islands of individuality who choose to enter into relations that can metaphorically be characterized as foreign affairs. But as Michael Walzer has argued, atomistic liberals make for a bad sociology, and I would add bad other things as well, such as bad biologists. Liberal atomists, writes Walzer, and I quote, do not provide either a rich or a realistic understanding of social cohesion, nor do they make sense of the lives of individuals actually live. The individual who stands wholly outside institutions and relationships and enters into them only when he or she chooses, and as he or she chooses, this individual does not exist and cannot exist in any conceivable social world, claims Walzer. In contrast, as is well known, the ontology of Jewish religiosity is communitarian through and through. It is not only that, unlike Christianity, which according to Rawls is a solitary religion, each is saved or damned individually, and we naturally focus on our own salvation to the point where nothing else might seem to matter. In religious Judaism, salvation is communal. Also, religious Judaism erects strict barriers between Jews and non-Jews, and much of the daily experience of an abiding Jew takes place in a communal setting. The ontology Israeli liberals offer their fellow citizens is therefore, to borrow from Walzer, unrealistic and detached from the lives of those citizens actually live. When we bear in mind the strong nationalist communitarian tenets of the narratives propagated by the Israeli nation-state and the strong nationalist communitarian rituals and practices Israeli Jews continually go through, such as military service and war every few years, narratives, rituals, and practices that reinforce the communitarian tenets of Jewish religiosity and that are constantly being reinforced by them. There's a mutual process of reinforcement between nationalism and religion in Israel in terms of the ontology and the communitarian and all that. If we bear in mind all of that, it is clear that amidst this process of mutual reinforcement of religion and nationalism, as long as Israeli liberals do not overcome their atomistic ontology, they will be alienated from and eventually defeated by the strong communitarian sentiments constantly internalized by the citizens of the state through the narratives, rituals, and practices of both Jewish religiosity and the Israeli state. This was written way before the elections. Can Israeli liberalism overcome its shortcomings? I think the answer is a partial yes. As is well known, liberalism is a family name. Autonomy liberalism is only one liberal brand. I wish to shortly point to another liberal option, which I call the liberalism of flourishing. Having its roots in Aristotle, it is mainly identified with John Stuart Mill's notion of individuality. In America, they really belittle the contribution of Mill, believe it or not, because they are adhere to autonomy liberalism. They don't make the distinctions that they should make between Kant's autonomy liberalism and Mill's individuality liberalism. So the roots obviously lie in John Stuart Mill's notions of individuality, with the British neoliberals of the late 19th century and early 20th century, such as T.H. Green, L.T. Hobhouse, and J.A. Hobson, with John Dewey in the United States, and contemporarily with Martha Nussbaum. What this liberalism entails, among other things, is that the state should provide its citizens with high-quality, deep-meaning works of art that, I claim, may allow them to create by their own some secular big meaning in their lives. Also, this liberalism is premised on unequivocal communitarian premises. It sees society as an organism whose members mutually affect each other in their intellectual and moral excellences and failures. If there is a chance for Israeli liberalism to have the upper hand in its struggle with religious Judaism, it lies in this type of liberalism. Thank you.